biggest national emitters. Of course, the U.S. is right after China as the #2 emitter. And we all here have been deeply involved in trying to come to grips with the best kinds of approaches here in the United States. I'm not going to dwell on the pictures of the Earth, but they have played a prominent role in the U.S. Dialogue. And this picture, which I've talked about so many times, is still one of the absolute keys. The atmosphere is highly vulnerable. You just heard Governor Jerry Brown say that back in the 1970s, when he read a treatise that talked about the thinness of the topsoil and the thinness of the atmosphere, that was what turned the light bulb on for him and led to his epiphany and a realization that this was really the issue that deserves the priority attention. So we're putting all the CO2 emissions from the burning of fossil fuels. Agriculture plays a role, animal agriculture plays a role, the management of forests, transportation. There are many factors, but this is the biggest factor, and if we can crack this nut, then the rest of it will fall in place. And of course, if you look at the history of it, we've covered this several times. Over the course of the 20th century, after World War II, it really kind of got out of control. Now, U.S. emissions have started coming down, and I want to compliment President Obama, and in his second term particularly, he's done a terrific job. Secretary of State John Kerry, a lot of individuals who have helped to make this happen. But in the United States, still 86% of the global warming pollution comes from energy-related activities. And if you break it down, you can see that electricity and heat and transportation are the biggest. And actually, the emissions from the transportation sector are now large enough that they are just actually passing over the emissions from the generation of electricity. Luckily, electric cars are coming on stream, not fast enough, but it's all connected. And the hope is we can build out renewable electricity and the electrification of the transportation fleet in tandem, and that is the strategy that many people have been following for quite some time. Of course, 14 of the 15 hottest years have ever measured have been since 2001, and the hottest of all is this year, even with 2 weeks left. The records are falling every single year now because the temperatures are going up so dramatically. And on a global basis, it's really, really clear from 1880 all the way up to the present day. It's a very clear pattern. Mother Nature is telling us we have got to solve this. There are really only 3 questions left about the climate crisis. Do we have to change? Can we change? And will we change? The answer to the first question is yes, and the evidence here shows why that is the case. More evidence showing why we really do have to change is the heat waves that have now just this year become actually veered into the life-threatening level in some regions, and that's not an exaggeration. The expected increase in temperatures is really quite threatening. Secondly, again, we've talked about this, the extra heat going into the oceans evaporates more water vapor that comes over the land and falls in these record downpours. In the last 12 months, Houston, Texas has had 2 once in 500-year floods and 1 once in 1,000-year downpour. Wow, 3 in 1 year, and one of them dumped the equivalent of the entire flow of Niagara Falls for 3.5 days into Harris County, Texas. We had a climate reality training in Harris County, Texas, and we talked to some of the people who had been through these tragedies, and while we were there in the training, next door in Louisiana, another once in 1,000-year downpour took place. It was absolutely unbelievable. Damages of between 10 and $15 billion. There have been 10 once in 1,000-year events in the United States just in the last 6 years. Mother Nature is telling us we have got to change. We've got to act. And it's not just the flood events and the downpours. It's also the, well, we've had this 400% increase, but it's also the droughts. I've showed this map before, but if you look at that legend, what is projected throughout this century in the terms of drought, this is unthinkable. It may seem a little abstract, but it's not. We cannot allow this to happen. It's not fair to our children and grandchildren. It's not fair to us. We're feeling it right now already. Look at the state of Texas. They have experienced historic drought from 2010 to 2015. 2011 was the worst drought, was the driest year ever for the state. In that year, out of the 244 counties in the state of Texas, 242 of them had fires. Now, what is going on? Well, the scientists tell us what is going on. Look at this from Los Angeles this year, behind Los Angeles. In another fire, California just had the most expensive fire in all of its history. In my state of Tennessee last week, many people were killed in fires that affected Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, in East Tennessee. And while that region was on fire, tornadoes came through. I've said before, every night on the TV news now is like a nature hike through the book of